tribes moved beyond the temperate zone and further up into Europe and further down into Asia, everywhere, all over the world. And so they started inhabiting different territories and climatic conditions and ecosystems and what have you. And as we have seen, this begins to change the experience of reality and the conditions of survival, the prerequisites for survival, and to change the internal and external phenomena and representations of these phenomena. And so some of these tribes became semi-nomadic, nomadic, wandering family groups in the desert. And the desert is one of the harshest territories you can imagine on earth. And that's because there's just dry, lifeless sand, an ocean of sand that's not fertile at all. And there's hardly any clouds, let alone rain and thunder. And the sun is a harsh, constant, scorching reality. So these classical phenomenistic deities, these gods of the elements, are no friends of the desert people. The only time they could really settle was around an oasis. So when water springs up from an unseen source underground, then they can settle, and date trees can grow and animals can graze and people can live and survive. And so these oases and oasis towns were very important cultural and religious centers, religious hubs. And yeah, but it's a very different kind of phenomena. It's like I said, it's an invisible source that springs up from below. And family dynamics became very important. They occupied their imagination. So like a big one that's a constant theme throughout the Old Testament is this struggle between brothers, the firstborn and the secondborn brother, or an earlier born and a later born brother. And a constant theme is like the younger brother kind of rises up to not defeat, but like to have the spiritual purity to supersede the older brother who had degenerated, who had lost the way, and who was now immoral. And they were constantly telling each other stories about these themes that intrigued them and perplexed them. And so the archetype that was most prevalent for them was the archetype of the father. Where previously in the hunter-gatherer phase, you can say it was the animal, in a sense, the spirit of the animal, and the mother, the fertility goddess. And now it's the father, this young Abraham. He goes into the temple where there are all these idols, the symbolic representations of all these phenomena and all the gods, and he smashes them. And so you can imagine the priests of the temple are very upset because these are the sacred, holiest of all gods, and all their rituals and ceremonies depends upon this, and it's terrible what you've done. They're very upset, very angry, and Abraham left just the biggest god. So they said, "Who did this?" Abraham says, "Ask him." the last remaining god. So he's implicating him, like maybe he did it, stepping away from the preceding culture and the classic, the tribal and classical religiosity around the object of worship, because originally they weren't objects of worship, mechanical devotion to the thing. It was a system, a way of representing, a way of expressing and being. But that cycle degenerates to the point where it becomes mechanical, ritualistic, superstitious, dogmatic. So, like when Moses leads the Israelites out of Egypt, he's they're leaving behind that a degenerative Egyptian civilization, because the Egyptian civilization had completed its cycle and had now lost its potency, its prosperity, its beauty, its golden age, and it was now in its declining dark age, age of ignorance. There are seasons, and every season, the tree of revelation brings you a new understanding, a new religion, a new um, insights into the dynamics and the problems. So that whole religio-cultural system of the hunter-gatherers and the religio-cultural system of the classical settled civilizations had its cycle and completed, and each time it presents its fruit, and the people eat the fruit, and they grow, but then eventually the fruit rots and the tree withers and the seasons change, and then so it's that cyclical revolution. The fruits of those previous epochs had been internalized, and now we were ready to leave those modalities behind and move forward. All those ritualized objects, all those god statues and idols, and that it was limiting, and it was obstructive to continue in the mechanical worship of those objects, but something more interesting and more conducive to human progress and development and was at hand, and we had to embrace that. One of the most important things, the things that's emphasized by Moses and the Old Testament, is that ye shall make ye no graven images. You'll have no idol. That's like the prime directive. There shall be no object of veneration, because God is infinite and immanent and invisible and indivisible. One of the key functions of Moses as a alpha male, as a leader of the people, is that he's also a judge and a rewarder and a punisher of good and bad behavior. And people come to him with cases that this guy took my this thing, and now he won't return to that was given in trust to this woman, and this child was born from this, all these complications and difficulties, and so he has to listen to the stories, and he has to render judgment, and so in his mind there are some clear distinctions, but there are also some loose associations, this distributed similarities and symbolisms of the right brain. And so at some point he goes up into the mountain, and he has this revelation, and he comes down with 10 commandments, which are laws, but they represent the principles that he's now distilled after all this experience of dealing with good and bad behavior, of good and evil, right and wrong. And that's the essence of the monotheistic system. And it's the way the imaginative amplification of this. These are processes within us, so they tell the stories, and the stories get refined, and they become an ideal, an idealization of what is the good behavior, and what is the best behavior, and what is the highest, most perfect behavior. And that idealization, that perfection, is God, is the highest thing, the highest principle. And it's, in a sense, it's rooted in dominance behavior, the dominance hierarchy that goes all the way down to the very beginnings of life. Dominance behavior is even in the crustaceans, even in the fish. So like in the chimpanzees, you have your alpha male, and your alpha male also rewards and punishes, rewards good behavior and punishes bad behavior in that kind of chimpanzee way. But the function of the alpha male at the top of the culture, of the hierarchy, it's a constant, so over millions and millions of years, this representation and this relationship, this connection to the higher authority within the community, the higher power, It's not just a psychological reality, it's a neurological reality. There are actual neurological pathways for this kind of behavior. The particular alpha male collective father at the top is one example of the archetypal feature, function, form, so that persists and gets extended, so the chief or the king or the emperor or whoever it is always looks up to the higher authority who is the god above him, so that dominance hierarchy is extended up into the heavens, into the divine realm, into the hierarchy of the gods and the highest of the gods. But now the having this ideal, this perfection, and you want to strive towards that, and so you have to, in a sense, uh, push aside the parts of you that are not in alignment with that, and struggle with that, and overcome that and fight that. And like I was saying right in the beginning, that you have these families that do it in a harsh and cruel and critical, traumatizing way, and there are these families that do it in a loving, kind, understanding, smart way, and so some are regulated, and some their goodness and their righteousness is more authentic and more real, and they can embody the ideals and the virtues. And then others of us, it's difficult for us, so we push aside the negative aspects and the shadow side, and it continues to live and it continues to grow inside of us, waiting for its opportunity to have its way, whether that's a certain urge or an impulse or a need or a want or a fantasy or desire, whatever. And so there's this split, and the more we have to pretend to be a certain way, and then the more the darker and deeper our shadows become, and the more ideal and perfect our God is, the more we begin to need this shadow side of the God, which is the devil, or the personification of all that is wrong and bad and cruel and evil. That's the struggle between good and evil. And we're talking about mothers and fathers raising children, so like telling them the stories of the Old Testament, of the Bible, and modeling those virtues and qualities, and showing them how to be kind and how to be respectful and how to use your wisdom to navigate complex situations, and so the child grows up like this, and then the child also lives a good, wholesome life, but others in the culture are not doing that, they're living a dark and dreadful life in the same or one culture. After, let's say, a few centuries, you eventually get to this point where the vision, the ideal that this prophetic figure, messianic figure, shaped and created, and all the striving, somebody is born who was raised by a mother and father with wisdom and love to embody these virtues and these ideals. And so that's what Jesus is and represents. And so his wisdom and love enables him to understand the dynamics of the culture and the relationship and life and reality in a way that earlier prophetic messianic figure couldn't, or they were just approximating. So their vision, their ideal was not a complete and total. Each one is like that. So you have Adam, you have Abraham, you have Moses, and so each one is a leap forward in human understanding, in human behavior. So why is Jesus so significant and so different